Mitch, let me ask you something, because this may be, I want to get your thoughts on the personality traits versus what kind of game this is. When you look at Coach Rhule, Coach Butler, and Coach Holgerson and kind of their delivery or temperament, don't you? It seems like it's a good fit for what the perception is of a game like this against Houston Christian on the heels of Michigan, because I think this game is all about emotional maturity. I talked about trailing at half against Wyoming, and we were supposed to be a good team. We just weren't quite ready. We hadn't seen that hurdle yet, right? Downplaying to an opponent. Like, it was new for us. We had to go through it. Their personalities seem to be well suited for a game like this.
I think their personalities are well suited for most games. And I think the thing that I have gathered from watching like Dylan used the term the head of the snake yesterday in talking about Rhule in particular and his halftime fire him up speech from Saturday, which I think has become like the storyline of the week for Nebraska. And I didn't know, like, I went into this week going, my gosh, what is the storyline of the week going to be? You just won 68-0. You got to wait a whole week before you can really bring out the Michigan conversation. And, Matt Rhule quickly answered that question with his, his revelation that he was angry. And then we saw the video later. I think that, like, the three of them together are the head of the snake in some ways. And just the way that they mesh, like with their, sometimes you get, and it doesn't mean that your team isn't going to work. It doesn't mean that like you can't have chemistry or togetherness, but sometimes you get a head coach and an OC and a DC who just don't seem on the same page with their messaging and like the way that they deliver messages. They might be fine in game planning and you could win a national championship under those circumstances. I don't know that, well, Tom Osborne and Charlie McBride, so different in terms of their personality, but they mesh together great, I think, in complementary ways with their communication skills. Mm-hmm. The three that Nebraska have now, and you could put Mike Eckler in there too. We just don't get to hear from him every week in the media. It's really interesting. And I think that like you hear from all three of them, and complimentary, yes, but also just very steady, consistent messages. You're not going to talk to one of them as a player and then talk to the other one and feel like you got something that was conflicting at all. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of where it went in my brain when you asked. And I just feel like, yeah, the three of them all together in how they speak to the team is beneficial for this group.
Yeah, Rhule consistently talking about no drop-off. The standard is the standard. Coach Holgerson going day by day about practice efficiency, right? Like, and then you hear Coach Butler say, listen, from scheme to personnel types to how I call the game, this is what we're looking for, and it's about playing. It's just how they talk. It just, I don't know, man. It doesn't seem like they leave any stone unturned, and even with themselves and how they approach it and how they're disseminating the information, it can't help but to trickle down to the players, you'd think.
Yeah, because then the players start to adopt that
and they
personality, and there's not a big, and again, like, does this mean that you're going to win more games? I don't know. It can't hurt to have consistency in the message and just consistency in everything in the way that you get from them. You're not going to get like a real high
build in accountability, though. It definitely builds in accountability.
Yeah, it's kind of an ambiguous thing. Like, there's not really a way to put your finger on like what the impact of that is going to be, at least from my perspective. There probably is, like, the players could speak to that because they hear from these three and four, if you put Eckler into it, they hear from them probably more than anybody, like in front of the whole team or in front of like the offense and defense, like half the team. So yeah, I think there's a real value to it. It's something to like continue to watch as the season goes on, and to be most valuable for them when they're going through a moment of adversity, like 68-0. You can have you can have you probably don't get to that point if you have like inconsistency in the message being delivered to the players, but if you do, and it's not necessarily going to hurt. Like when they get into the Big Ten and they're in this slog of games that are just expected to be competitive and close every week, I think that's when it really becomes of increased value to know what you're going to get, no matter who it is that the coach that's standing in front of you is.
Mitch, do you think, you said something there that kind of caught my attention about, does that mean you're going to win more games? And you say, I'm not sure, but it doesn't hurt. And I think we think that about a lot of the things we see from this coaching staff, right? We're like, hey, I kind of like how they do this. I don't know if it leads to more wins, but it certainly can't hurt. And I like the way they're operating. And there's 100 of those things, right? And I just feel like at some point, like, yes, any 1 or 5 or 10 of those things don't necessarily mean you're going to win games. When you put them all together, like I feel like there's a tipping point at some point.
Was it like week 1 or 2, Mitch, where he gave, what was the innocuous example? And he goes, well, what does that have to do with winning? Nothing, but everything, right? That was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, he was talking about the box in the hallway, right? He goes,
picking up stuff. Yeah.
And so he's right. Like picking up a box in the hallway doesn't mean that you beat Michigan in 2 weeks, right? But if you add that in with all these other things we're talking about, like it just feels like at some point, and maybe that's why he says, I don't know. I'm sure there's a question in here somewhere. You can find it. But like maybe maybe that's why when he says, like, hey, like I do it faster than 3 years if I could. Maybe that's just the time that it sort of takes for it to actually tip from, I don't know if this leads to more wins, but this is the right way to go about things. Like maybe the third year is when you've accumulated enough of those things.
The defense of the program.
This is probably a rhetorical question, but would Matt Rhule have gotten up in the locker room and delivered the message that he did in week 2 of year 1? Probably not. Like,
no.
Yeah. You have to know him, and like the foundation has to be in place before you put yourself in a spot where it's 33-0 and you're lighting them on fire. Like it would have been a much different message if they had been in that spot. And there was thinking back to 2023, there was a game against somebody where Nebraska was in a comfortable spot at halftime, and they got a much different message. And in that game, I'm sure he could have found more reasons, or just as many, to nitpick about something. I mean, he was nitpicking about a few plays in the last 40 seconds of the half, or how Nebraska didn't instill enough fear in its opponent so that they just sat on the ball, or were fearful to cut the O lineman when Nebraska did the kneel down. Like that's you're reaching a little bit to find that, but it's great that he does it. I just think that they're all of these things, like talking about. I think at some point Rhule mentioned in year 1 about the importance of the locker room being clean. And you don't want to walk into the locker room and see stuff all over the floor, and it's like the box in the hallway. You're not going to win a game because of that, but it's all about what you present as a program, and it's what all of those details are so important to him. And if that's important to him, then clearly messaging and like tone and just communication skills from the top all the way on down through the coordinators and the position coaches, like you have to have their personalities, and they're not all going to have the same personality. Certainly Butler doesn't have the same personality as Rhule or Holgorsen, but the way that they get their points across to the team needs to have consistency. And that's not a small thing. That's a big thing that does, in the end, like in a roundabout way, equate to giving yourself a better chance to win.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I talked to you, this is a handful of weeks ago, Mitch, and I said, one of the cool things about the CEO status is Coach Rhule gets to put his individual fingerprints on a practice whenever he wants to, right? He can pull over Keona Davis or Justin Red or Amari Sant or whomever, and he can pour into them. And I'm like, the more they get his personality, the better off I think they'll be. I was talking to the guys yesterday, and Grant and Jay Moore, about he gave practical when he said, I'll just tell you, this is just like the former player. When he said, don't schedule them again, they don't respect you. The fan, like if I didn't play, I would I'd be like, come on. But the player in me and those guys to a man were like, that was the goal. He gave words to what the end game was. Don't ever come here again to play us, right? Like, you need to know that when you left, I want you feeling as miserable about yourself as possible. So it resonated with us because he gave words to what we actually wanted to accomplish when you came to Memorial Stadium. That's why we all struggled with the whole Nebraska nice thing or cheering for, you know what I mean? Like, if you ask us, it's cool to talk about, oh, it's nice. But as a player, it's like, get your ass up out of here, get your luggage, get back on the bus, don't come back. Like, when he said that, we were like high-fiving because that's ultimately, as a player, what you're after. He hit.
I wonder where that came from, because I don't
know, but he was spot on.
I don't think it's the mentality at Temple. I don't think he got that there. Maybe at Penn State, they felt that way, and it could be something that Paterno instilled. Although all the conversations that I've had and that I've heard other people have, whether it's in a press conference or on the side with Matt Rhule, that's never something that I've heard come up until last week. And maybe it's just because he hasn't been in a situation with a team at Nebraska where you could do that to somebody, where you could demoralize an opponent. Like, most of their wins have been struggles, and they certainly haven't won a game 68-0. So, but I wonder where it came from. I wonder if that's something that he picked up from. He obviously embraces everyone who he can that has a connection to Nebraska's past. And maybe he picked that up in recent years. Most of the stuff that we hear from him, the OOU and his single digits and all of that, like, it started early in his development as a head coach. But he is definitely a believer that you continue to learn. And here he is at 50, perhaps, like, picking up something new. And maybe that's something new. Maybe that's a talking point that he's not had. I don't imagine that he had that conversation a lot with the guys at halftime at Temple or at Baylor. And it's nonsense. It doesn't make any. It doesn't work. Apply in the NFL. So that could be totally new to Nebraska, the Matt Rhule at Nebraska, and maybe he heard it from somebody that that, like, somebody like a Grant Wistrom. I'd be interested to ask him.
And maybe, like, we're doing too much with it, but I just think at some point, if Nebraska ever wants to be relevant, top 20 relevant, like, Memorial Stadium has to be a place you don't want to come. If you get the extra $200,000 in a buy game, you need to contemplate your players' health, right? You need to understand, like, the money may not be worth it, because this isn't the first time that Nebraska had to pay a little extra for non-cons, but it used to be because we had to make it worth your physical trip, right? Like, this is not going to be good on your guys, but here's the money. Now it's, well, we want money in the coffers, so I'll sacrifice my guys. We need to, I think he wants it to get back to the point where
you have to pay a premium.
You have to pay a premium price if you want to come here for a buy game.
I'm sure there were probably some things that Joe Moorhead, the Akron coach, didn't love about the way the second half of that game went. But
100%.
Nebraska had a mission to accomplish, and that was more important than not hurting the feelings of a visiting coach. So that's fine, and, like, it's fair game. I mean, you sign up for it, you got to play 60 minutes. So look, you're not gonna put Dylan back out there or put the starting defensive line out there when it's 68-0. Like, you have to think about your own team's health in the equation too, and I think that'll be in play. You would hope for Nebraska that decision is in play at some point on Saturday against Houston Christian. But the idea of not wanting to come back, like, I think it's a different conversation if you were to talk to players. Like, the Akron players probably don't want anything to do with Nebraska again, but I bet their administration will sign up for it, and they're the ones that ultimately make the decision. So unless you're going to be like Pacific in 1994, then there's probably not a whole lot that can happen to avoid that kind of a thing. I don't love the in the case of Akron or a G5 program. I don't love like the talking point that, oh, they have to do this because this is how they fund their entire athletic department. That's not the case. Like they get good money, but like you can't fund an entire group of 5 athletic department with $1.5 million. Like their operating budget is like 10 times that amount or more. So Nebraska's not like keeping their athletic department afloat by bringing these programs in, but there is great value, and it is maybe the single biggest chunk of money that a school like Akron receives in a calendar year.
Mitch, you were talking about maybe how Joe Moorhead didn't necessarily love how the second half went. We used to think about this a lot because it happened at Nebraska a lot, maybe not so much anymore, but I've always, like, if you're putting in second, third, fourth, whatever string guys in the game, I've always thought, like, don't you have an obligation to those guys to continue to call a normal game?
You should.
In the sense of, like, let them, like with TJ Lateef, one of the first things that I was talking with Austin about when we were watching the game was, hey, like, I hope they let TJ Lateef throw the ball a little bit. Like, just having him come and hand the ball off doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah. Holgerson's perfect for that because he I think errs on the side of being aggressive there. Like he doesn't care. He's not thinking about, oh, how is this going to, affect the psyche of the other sideline? It's not his MO. It has never been his MO. It's not how he coached as a head coach or an OC, at Texas Tech or Oklahoma State. So that's perfect. He's the one who wanted to keep Dillon in the game when it was 40-0. I was sitting there in the press box going, he's got to be done. Like they have to be done. Like they're not going to put him back out there when it's 40-0 and you're 5-6 minutes into the third quarter, just for like the law of averages. Like you don't want him to, and he did, he did the spin move. I think that might've been on the drive to put him up 40-0, but like, don't put him in harm's way. And I didn't know, of course, like about the halftime conversation at that point. And maybe if I had, I would have thought differently. Like I would have thought, well, maybe they'll give him another series. But it sounded like Dana was the guy who was saying, nope, we got to get him one more. Like they had things they wanted to work on. And it was important for Holgorsen to get him a 300-yard game. Like that kind of stuff. Dillon's not going to stand up there at a press conference and say, yeah, I really wanted to get a 300-yard game. But it matters to him. Like, of course it matters to him. Like he's human, and it's a big thing for a quarterback.
It also matters the way we talk about him, right? Like not necessarily us, but like nationally, the way people talk about quarterbacks. Like
stats matter.
Yeah, it's a different thing to throw for 270 than it is for 360, right? Like that's
of course.
Even if the game is the exact same.
And it's part of the bigger goal with Nebraska football in general. Like Matt Rhule wants this. He even said this. He goes, we don't want this place to be a joke, which I thought was pretty was pretty bold. But they want to be known as a football place, I think was his quote. And if you have a quarterback, maybe you're padding his stats, whatever, like other teams do it too. If you got a quarterback who going into the month of October is getting mentioned in the Heisman conversation, that helps Nebraska in a lot of ways. So he's, if they can do whatever they can do to create that scenario, they're going to jump at it.
Are we going to act like Lagway didn't get buzz after what they did against LIU and in his 18 minutes of play? Like they absolutely did. And then last week happened, and Sellers still has yet to get off to a good start. So I'm just telling you, I don't have any problems with it, to be honest. There were only 6 shutouts in all of college football this past weekend. 6. And it was a dirty dog doo-doo schedule.
Yeah,
like
right.
There wasn't a lot. You know what I mean? There were plenty.
There should be a lot in week 2. Yeah, you'd expect a lot.
And there weren't. So I don't have any. Tell that to Iowa and Albany 2 weeks ago, right? Like we do this thing where we downplay competitors, and the funny thing is we don't want the players actually doing that, right? Like as fans, you don't want the EKG of intensity.
Well, you saw them after the field goal block and how excited they were. And that's all about the shutout right there, because the game was not in doubt. And if you give up 3, like it's not going to matter in as far as the outcome or like really much of anything moving forward. But they wanted the 0. Like it had been a long time. And even if they had a shutout in week 1, they would have wanted it just as much in week 2.
He's always got something up his sleeve for motivation or to buzz. What is it that you think it is on Saturday?
going into the game, I think it's going to be a continuation of the message that we've heard this week. Don't let up. Take care of your business. I don't care about the score. I care about the tape. Like, it's a continuation of what happened last week. Now, I say that, and he'll probably come out with something much smarter and much more developed, because that's he spends part of his time doing that. I don't know if maybe if he's got an inner circle that he sits down with after a game or before a game, and they talk about like what the motivational tactics are going to be. It would seem that he might, because they're always seemingly genuine and authentic and unique and well planned out. Just like you asked me that question, and I haven't thought so much this week about what's Nebraska's motivational tactic going to be in week 3 against Houston Christian. And I just say, probably a continuation of week 2. Take a step back. Now, it probably won't be a continuation of week 2, because Matt Rhule's thought about it a lot more than I have, and he's got smart people thinking about it with him. So I'm sure they'll come up with something. I don't know what it'll be. Give me 3 hours and like a panel of people, and maybe we'll figure it out.
That's Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, appreciate the time as always. Good talk today. We'll and even if you get that pineapple on your pizza, it's all right. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.